Welcome to the movie review of Project Power, the new Netflix movie starring Jamie Foxx and Joseph Gordon-Levitt. If you saw the premise of the movie, it's a pill that when taken, you have 5 minutes where you have superpowers. Now, when I thought about this, and you think about comic book movies in DC and Marvel and what they produced the last 10 plus years, the concepts that are in your head and your imagination can go a lot of different places because there's so many uniqueness and so much ability to kind of take something like that. And even for older movies, like there's a movie called Push that's kind of similar, or Limitless. There's a movie called that with Bradley Cooper from a few years back. So I had all these ideas going into it, and that's kind of sometimes dangerous when you have an idea of what a movie is or what you want a movie to be, because more often than not you become disappointed walking out. And I would say this is a watchable movie, which I know sounds kind of condescending, but it's meant to be kind of a compliment because it is something that I would watch. You know, it is something that is worth, I would say, the 2 hours. I mean, the ending was good. It kind of set up a story that almost, if you had a sequel, it's kind of like, okay, the origin of it, which I think probably took too long. It didn't have enough of the origin in it to begin with. It kind of set things up for a sequel so you can kind of get more into the nitty gritty. But it's also like these people aren't stupid. They knew what kind of movie they were trying to make, and they checked off certain boxes that they wanted to check off. Now, me disagreeing with the structure in how they checked off, what boxes they checked off, and how they checked off the boxes they did check off is a different entirely thing. It's set in New Orleans, and what it is the government is what we are led to understand. We're not really sure too much about the product of the drugs that give you the powers. We don't really understand that a whole lot. Even at the end, we don't really understand it a whole lot. We don't understand the government. I guess the only intention of having it is so they can create super soldiers, is the really end game, even though that's not entirely clear, or why that's the end game, or it's vague. So it's hard. The whole, I always feel in action movies, a big part of it is the villain, because you have to know who the heroes or who the main characters, the protagonists, are trying to defeat or overcome or win. Because you want to, the stakes are winning or losing. What's going to happen if you lose? What's going to happen if you win? And who do you have to defeat to claim either one of them? So this starts in New Orleans, and the two characters are Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who's a cop in New Orleans, who's trying to stop the drug trafficking of this pill. What they're doing is they're stopping in different cities and not staying there forever, but staying there for a little while to kind of prototype the drug, just put it out there to see how it reacts in test cases, so people can take it and they can see how they react. Because in the beginning, it's so new, and that's why it's kind of really an origin story of the drug as well. They don't know how it reacts to people. They don't know why it reacts differently to some people as the other people, and that's part of the mystery of it, which they could have made you understand that more, and that was part of the point. But we don't really we don't have a villain in the story. There's one woman towards the end of the show that comes out and is to the forefront of the bad person, but you really don't understand their intentions or what. Besides putting the drug out there as a protocol, you don't really understand what they're doing or what kind of motives or intentions they have, which really makes it hard to root for the good guys when you don't have a bad guy to really get your teeth into and hate and dislike and root against or for, if depending on the situation, because there could be anti-heroes. I'm all for that too. Jamie Foxx plays a character who is being identified as the cops of New Orleans as the source or the distributor of this drug, Power. They're calling Power. The truth of that, as we find out in the first two scenes, you have two action scenes. One with Jamie Foxx as he's trying to get to a dealer of the power drug, because he's trying to find the source as well. He's trying to find he seems to know the people that are manufacturing that or kind of putting out the drugs as test cases, but he wants to locate them, basically. The reason for this is his daughter is mixed up in the whole thing. As one of the first, we find out, I don't want to spoil it, but his daughter is, because that is kind of the spoiler. Who his daughter is and why his daughter is kidnapped is one of the big points of the movie, and we do find that out at the end. So the way it set it up with him, I thought was really good, because it kind of put you into the world and you understand a little bit of the dystopia, or the difference, or the, maybe it's just New Orleans. Maybe I'm not used to seeing some of the suburbs of New Orleans, or the inner city of New Orleans. But I like the aesthetic of how that was set up. And then Joseph Gordon-Levitt has the same kind of, it's like, that's big action scene. And then you have an action scene with Joseph Gordon-Levitt where you understand him and this teenage girl who's peddling the stuff at the, the very lowest tier of everything. And so from there, it's a story of both separately, Jamie Foxx and Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character trying to figure out who is distributing this power pill. And it's hard because it doesn't get, it's interesting because there's action and there's good, the fight scenes and choreography of that is good. And Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Jamie Foxx have the presence of movie stars, so they're just charismatic and interesting to watch, even though they're not, the story doesn't really give them a whole lot to do. And it's hard because they're by themselves for most of the movie. And what you're kind of looking for, and the way I would structure it would be like, 15, 20 minutes into the movie, you have them kind of collide, and you understand the different intentions and what their different ways of coming at it. But you need the strength of both of them to carry this weak story. And the girl, who's a teenage girl who becomes part of the whole gang, it's a threesome trying to find his daughter. They kind of team up to find the daughter. And it's interesting. She's an African-American girl in the projects, or the lower class of New Orleans. And when you have a movie that's based on science and based on like this pill, that what it does is kind of unlocks your DNA. So it doesn't give you like superpowers. It gives you the ability to do what other animals can do that you can't. Like, a lizard can regrow limbs, or, things like that. That's the power it gives you. So it's not like these people aren't flying like a bird. They don't have that ability, which is, I thought kind of that would be what they would be able to do, but they can't do that kind of thing. So there's a really, they present it as a really scientific basis for the movie. So this girl, who's the third on the call sheet, she's really important. She's a lot of screen time, maybe more than any of them, because she's in both worlds of the Jamie Foxx world and the Joseph Gordon-Levitt's world before they collide and come together. But the two things that it hit me at the end, and even when I was watching it, her one escape plan for getting out of her situation of poverty and her mother's sick and all this stuff, she wants to be a rapper. So, and at first I thought they were joking, and then I was like, oh no, they mentioned it a couple times through the movie. She's definitely intentions, and she's good. I mean, they show her rapping, and that's fine, and that has to kind of, her shyness, she has to kind of overcome a little bit, which is fine as well. And I guess that's speaking to a base of people, like a demographic of people that they want to like the movie. But I also think representation is really important. So here you have in this movie about a drug that's kind of allowing you to kind of unlock different potentials in yourself. You have Jamie Foxx, you have Joseph Gordon-Levitt trying to stop it, and then you have this other African-American teenage girl who is a drug peddler. She's trying to support her mother who's sick by selling drugs, and her one escape plan is to be a rapper. And as good as she is, and she's, they show her talent and skill in the movie, but I'm like, why would you do that? It's a story about science. You could have such an interesting arc with her about being the smart one, about being the one that understands the potential of this drug, or how the drug works, or why it would affect people. She could be like the genius Peter Parker version in that movie. And instead of being kind of like this little silly girl that's clever and street smart, which she does show and she does help, she could be the smart one that understands the science, understands what they're doing, and understands the principles of it. Obviously, doesn't know the specs of anything or anything, but I think there's a huge missed opportunity in the movie, that instead of her saying that she doesn't like math or doesn't like school and is kind of a delinquent there, it would have been so much more interesting to have her be a brilliant scientist that, because of her circumstances, is where she is and is still poverty, but she has this smartness and this genius in her that now she's in a situation that she can really unlock it and utilize it. They wasted that. And I also think that partly the way they structured the movie in the beginning was it didn't show you enough origin. So, 40, 15, an hour into the movie, you don't really understand what they're going after, like what their end goal. Like, you understand Jamie Foxx is trying to get his daughter, but you don't understand why really the daughter. You understand she was taken. You understand she was taken because she has something to do with this drug power, but it's left unclear. And you want to root for him, but you don't really understand that. You don't understand where the wife is. You don't understand his history too much. There's a couple flashbacks. There's one scene with him and the girl in the car, and it's like a 2-3 minute scene where he kind of has this exposition of everything, and it's just like on their way someplace else. And it's like, this is really the meat and potatoes, the main part that needed to be an hour ago discussed. It's just a throwaway in a car, which is the least interesting cinematic way to break down the whole point of the movie. Like, why they're in this situation in the first place, how this even thought to become available. And it's like, instead they didn't do that. Instead they jumped right into the action, which I kind of understand, but it needed to go back to that point where they explained everything a lot quicker. And I'm not saying I enjoyed the movie, and this is just my preference of when I structure it and I bring it down, because even though it's in a way it's a tired concept of superpowers and how they get it, because it wasn't an origin story either. It wasn't like someone had, like, that's the other thing, someone took the pill. Besides the I don't want to spoil it, but it's not really an origin story of some superhero that's going to create a supervillain. It's really real life. These people have extraordinary powers that die in they only have it last for 5 minutes and then it goes away. So people are doing all these crimes because they have these powers for 5 minutes. And on the cop side, they want to stop this and figure out how to contain it. And Jamie Foxx just wants to get his daughter back, who's somehow in the middle of it, which you don't really understand. Even at the end, there's pieces of it that kind of lead you to conclusions, but I wouldn't say I fully understand it even then. So it's a tricky movie. While I say all that, and it seems like I'm ragging on it and giving it a hard time, Jamie Foxx and Joseph Gordon-Levitt have a charisma on screen, whether they're together, which was the better part of the movie, the second half, when they finally teamed up to kind of go against these people, much better than the first half when they were separated. And they just have a style to them and a presence to them that I enjoy watching. Like, even though the structure of the story I didn't find it as compelling as it should have been. I didn't find the obstacles or attention, or there really wasn't a villain that you could root against, or an understanding of why anything that was happening was really happening. So it's one of those movies that you can enjoy while you're watching it, and then afterwards you're like, what? But why? That didn't make any. But you're just kind of questioning. After you watch it, you're like settle down for like a half hour, and then you start remembering some of the pieces. And you're like, well, that didn't make any sense. Why did they do it like that? Why? They never explained this part. And you kind of get lost in the movie. And if you're looking for like a movie where you can kind of get lost in the action of it, or there's one really cool fight scene towards the end, which I won't give away, but that was really kind of cool. And I wish they expanded a little bit more on those, where they had something really cool for a couple minutes. And I wish instead of a couple minutes, it was like 5 or 7 minutes, where they really expanded the scope of it, so you could really live in that action moment. Because I want a mindless action movie as much as the next person. But when you kind of structure it in the world of a scientific ideal or principle, I want something a little bit more with depth, a little bit more layers on top that I can really invest in and have the substance that you could. But this didn't have it. It didn't even have. The other thing too that bothered me is it didn't have enough humor in it. And one of the things with these action movies that I find is really important is, you want to have the action, you want to have the suspense and the drama, and kind of like the root. You want to be able to root. It's not like wrestling in a way. You want to root for the good guy and not like the bad guy. And you got to have it really identify and powerful ends of that spectrum. But also you want to have a little levity in it. You want to have some comedy. You want to have some personality. and it didn't have enough of that in it for my liking as well. And in a way, it's setting up as the origin, and I could see another movie that develops all the things that I thought it lacked. But I don't know if it'll get that chance. I will see how it just came out this weekend. We'll see how it does for views, see how Netflix responds to it. And also, the other part of that too is I don't think the creators wanted to make that movie, because I'm sure they understood the concepts of what it would take. I'm sure they understood that, well, if we start with an action scene, then we go to the origin scene so people understand what everyone's going for, they could have done it. I mean, they could have written it that way, but they're kind of doing a certain movie for a certain kind of audience, which is strange when they have Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Jamie Foxx, who are older, in their 40s and 50s. So when their audience seems to be high schoolers, it might almost would be interesting if it was younger people on it. If they had some 20-year-olds, I think that would have been interesting. If they had people right out of the academy instead. Anyway, I'm not going to rewrite the whole movie. I do suggest you see it. It is something I would put as a solid B-. There are certainly elements that I enjoyed, but check it out. It's called Project Power on Netflix. This is a review. My name is Andrew Worcester. I appreciate you sticking around for the whole 16 minutes of this, and there'll be more to come, so stay with us.